Let's take a fairly typical situation. You have a conversation with someone. Maybe it's face to face. Maybe it's a phone call. The conversation ends. You say goodbye. You end the call. You walk away. But then another process begins. It's a process of thoughts. Maybe it's your inner voice starting up, asking questions. Why did you have to say that? Why do you have to talk so much? The judgment. I sound so stupid. I'm so awkward. I sounded like an idiot. Notice here that while you are judging yourself so harshly, you're also making assumptions about the person you were talking to. I bet they don't like me. They were just being kind and listening to me out of pity. They probably think I'm an idiot. This is rumination. This is a direct consequence of all your past social and mental conditioning. So you call it overthinking. You call it anxiety. Even social anxiety. You call it your nature. It is not your nature. You may try to explain it away as having a lack of confidence or a lack of self-esteem. But explanations don't really address the issue. Often, in enough cases, that inner voice either sounds like, or says the same things as a figure of external authority from your past. This could be a parent, a teacher, a former partner, a friend, a boss. So no, this is not your nature at all. Some people mistakenly believe that this inner voice is the voice of their soul. This is not true. This is the voice of your inner policeman, your prison guard, that past authority figure that keeps you in your invisible prison, keeping tabs on you and preventing you from being your natural, conscious, spontaneous self. This is quite the predicament. You start to feel confident about yourself and pick up some self-esteem, then out of nowhere that voice pipes up and that stream of thoughts start running through your mind. The self-confidence crumbles, the self-esteem disappears, and you're back to square one again. The prisoner in the invisible prison. Just like a real, physical prison, you're isolated from the outside world. Your movements are restricted to your mind, from memory to imagination and back to memory again. The outside world, social situations, large events, parties, dating, going to work, going shopping, become problematic and complicated. You start to fear other people. While politicians dismiss anxiety as a not very serious mental health issue, even to the point of poking fun at it, it destroys the nature and quality of many people's lives and limits them in their activities. In extreme cases, it can make someone housebound and even afraid to answer their door. Even answering a phone call is a scary event for a significant number of people. But as I stated previously, this is quite a predicament. So let us unpack this and see what's really going on. We're going to need a point of reference so we don't lose track of ourselves. Therefore, it's useful to have an illustration on screen which we can refer back to. This is what's known as the internal architecture. You have the environment and the mind, the senses and felt sense of immediate experience, consciousness, the prefrontal cortex, then we have memory, thinking and thought processes, and imagination. Please note that the environment and the mind are together. The mind is not something that's inside your head. I'm assuming that when you're walking down the street you don't see things which other people cannot see, nor do you hear sounds that other people cannot hear. The mind is space which exists all around you, into which you project all your thoughts, feelings, and emotions. In the center of the illustration is of course the brain, which is our internal receiver and processor. We can just leave it there because brain anatomy and neurology are horribly complex. So we won't be getting into all that. It's enough to just accept the brain as a receiver, processor and transmitter of energy, consciousness, signals and so forth. So let's look at how all this internal architecture is meant to work. To make it a bit simpler to follow, we will be working counter-clockwise round this illustration. Stimuli and information come in from the environment through our senses and the felt sense of immediate experience, together with consciousness to be recorded into memory. This is what we can call perception. Then from memory we have thinking and thought processes, working between memory and imagination, and can respond to what we have perceived from the environment. This is what we call conception. The prefrontal cortex shapes the brain according to our experiences and enables our higher functions. It can vary in thickness, depending on what life experiences, particularly in childhood, you have gone through. This is what is known as neural plasticity. As you can see, nature has gifted us with a fine internal architecture of mental and sensory faculties which can be quite remarkable when it is fully used. This also ties in with the natural order, the manifestation of reality and the unfolding of existence and being out of that manifestation of reality. Then we also have what is known as the mystical transaction, which is essentially the relationship between the environment and the brain. I just wanted to get that out of the way before we move on to the next part. The next part is of course social conditioning. Social and mental conditioning is the process we are all put through from very early childhood. The whole point of social conditioning is so that you create an ego and identity based on a pattern of social and cultural beliefs which make up what we call society. This is to teach you how to live within that pattern of social and cultural beliefs and supposedly makes you easier to deal with. As we're only going to be working with a small part of this illustration, let's change the illustration for one which is more relevant. This is the ego and identity. On the left you can see everything which exists in memory and arises from the past. On the right we can see everything that arises out of imagination and what we call the future. The process of socialization, or social conditioning, is for most people quite traumatizing. You're taking naturally curious, mindful children with an undifferentiated perspective and trying to mold them into sensible, mature adults with a differentiated perspective who know right from wrong and also what really matters and what doesn't. The actual process is authoritarian in nature and is based on fear motivation and desire creation and building. Do this. Don't do that. Be like this. Don't be like that. Throw in morality, influences from an organized religion or two, some philosophical materialism, a lot of cultural myths and illusions, and you have the major components of the social conditioning or programming agenda. There's a couple of things to keep in mind here. We switched illustrations just to focus on one part of our internal architecture. Likewise, the ego and identity is based on the focus of conscious attention. This is your most basic and immediate plane of consciousness. It's what you focus on. There are many different planes of consciousness, just as there are many levels of reality. But social conditioning flattens everything down to just 2 or 3 levels of reality, which are all conceptual forms of reality. This means reality created out of human imagination and human thinking. Conceptual reality is different from actual reality, such as biology, the universe, and nature. For example, the ego and identity is a concept. Society is a concept. Religion is a concept. A tree is actual reality because we humans did not invent or create trees. Marriage is another concept. The conditioned mind is preoccupied with conceptual reality. So when you're relying on your ego, or narrow focus of conscious attention, and your perception of reality is largely conceptual, then it stands to reason you're going to be doing a lot more thinking. There's some statistics somewhere which state that the average person has somewhere between 60 and 80,000 thoughts per day. This suggests that thinking, which is an activity, is by far the most frequent and most popular activity we humans do in our lives. The other thing that needs to be pointed out here is that when you shift your perspective down to your focus of conscious attention, or keep it there, as many people do, then fear becomes part of the thought process. In nature, any focus of conscious attention is a threat detection system, scanning the environment for potential threats. So when you center your conscious perspective on your ego, and your narrow focus of attention, then fear, anxiety and insecurity becomes part of your thinking processes. However, when fear becomes part of the thinking process, then so too does desire. This is all energy, but fear and desire are polar opposites. Desire attracts and fear repels. Usually a thought, which is dependent on time, contains both fear and desire. Often when we fear something, we desire something else and vice versa. So it is usually that through thought we are seeking security, because of the fear and insecurity, but there is no security because thinking is in itself an insecure activity which is also impermanent. Thoughts pass, they come and go, so as one thought passes it is replaced by other thought, and then another thought, and then another. So we have to seek our security from elsewhere. So we start by seeking security from the past, such as from our internal principle and fixed model of reality, which we have developed from the past. The principle may be based on awareness, on ignorance, on empathy, on whatever, but it is the principle we keep referring back to. In among this is our pre-existing model of reality, the way we accept or understand reality to be. Please keep in mind that we're dealing with concepts or fixed images here. This model of reality may be attached to or associated with a belief system or ideology. Someone with a religious background, say Christianity, will have a model of reality based on Christian dogma and beliefs. Someone with, say, a political model, right or left, will have a right or left-wing political model of reality. Social roles will also add something to this model of reality and principle, as will our narratives or life history and our character, something which we start developing from around the ages of 7 or 8. This is where we have to get into time and time perception. Thought is fragmented. Each thought we have is made up from smaller fragments of thought. If we were using our full internal architecture, and therefore mindful and, as people say, living in the moment, our perception would be based on the very recent past once our sensory information and the felt sense of immediate experience is recorded into memory. But our internal principle and model of reality comes from even further back in the past. But we are conditioned to believe that there is such thing as a future and that we are part of that future. This conceptual belief in a future is even baked into our language. We say "I will" to indicate a prediction, something which is based on conscious will. Yet we say we are going to do something when we have made up our minds and have formed an attachment to some action or activity in the future. Only the future does not exist as anything other than a concept. Existence arises out of a manifestation of reality, and out of existence being arises. In actual reality there is no future because what exists only exists as far as the present moment. The future only exists in our imagination, and we form an attachment to that what we conceive to be our future. We can become very attached to our future reality. If you look online you can find videos of traffic stops in the United States. Usually a cop has probable cause to stop the driver. Maybe they were drinking and driving, or some other reason. In many of these videos a conflict or an argument will develop because the cop is asking for documents or to ask questions, and this new reality does not reflect the future imagined reality of the driver, to which they're attached. Even when the driver is so obviously drunk and slurring their words, they will still create a conflict with the cops through being so attached to their future imagined reality and life. This is an example of what we are discussing here. However, the ego through thought is still seeking security, but there is no security either in the past or in the future. So what we then try to do is to try and create order or have some degree of control over our environment, circumstances, or others so as to align or match up the reality from the past with the future reality which gives us the illusion of control and security. We see this as normal, because we associate external authority with being in charge, with being in control, so this seems normal and socially acceptable. You see, in addition to all the social conditioning we are subjected to, we are also surrounded by different people who are constantly telling us who we are, who we should be, what to think, what to believe, how to behave and what we should be doing in life. This also comes across as being in control. Not only people are doing it to us, we are also doing it to other people. We do this in some many ways. We tell people. We assume a certain role in a social situation and thereby force or coerce someone else into another role. I am doing this to you right now. I have assumed the role of content creator, which puts you into the role of listener or viewer. But see, we are all seeking security or assurances through our ego and thought, and we are all trying to match up the past with the future so as to find this security, only that no security can be found. So, having got this far, and understanding what we've been covering, we have created the conditions and environment for overthinking. It's also important here to remind ourselves that our ego is a concept made up from everything in memory, our internal principle and model of reality, our narrative, our beliefs, who we believe we are. The reality of our egos is our memory and what's going through our mind. Oh, for sure, other people know us and validate us, plus we can express our identity through clothes, hairstyles, possessions, but it's not guaranteed that other people will know who we are or even accept us. This is where we come to the principle of the social contract. It goes something like this. I will accept you for who you think you are if you accept me for who I think I am. Everything in society and our social interactions are based on this one principle. This would be all well and good if we were treated all the same and there was equality in society. But this is not the case. Just like other primate species, we humans have domination culture in our nature to organize our societies and social groups. There are various hierarchies and social classes and groups. This is where the authoritarianism of social conditioning is coming from. So when we throw in moral reasoning, social stigma, and a laundry list of different labels, then we have a society of people made up of more important and less important, in groups and out groups, better and worse, desirable and undesirable, and so on and so forth. And so we all judge, both ourselves and others, because that is what we are conditioned to do. There's judgment, there's bigotry, there's jealousy, there's different forms of discrimination, some subtle, some not so subtle, and this is how society is so divided and fragmented. This is how we end up with bullying and abuse. Let's switch illustrations for a moment to a word map so you can see what I'm referring to here. As we can see from the word map, we have a lot of words. Note the negative connotations of these words. They are all judgments. They are all labels. They're all designed to hurt and create emotional and psychological wounds. Words are powerful. Very powerful. You can say cut yourself with a knife. You get a scar for a couple of weeks and then your finger heals. But when it comes to words and emotional or psychological wounds, the healing can last months or even years. There's plenty of 30 or 40-year-olds out there in society who are still healing from things said to them in their childhoods or teens. Rumination is a much bigger issue in society than perhaps we're prepared to admit. Indeed, it would appear that the more refined the level of reality and physical existence, the longer it takes for trauma to heal. Forget the popular saying about sticks and stones. We can see that the ego structure tends to hinder healing from emotional and psychological trauma rather than promote it. Given the fact that a significant majority of people experience at least one or two adverse childhood experiences in their lives, and the trauma, it really doesn't need much to distort one's individual conscious perspective and create a process through which overthinking and rumination happens. A common situation is where you have a parent and a small child, say 3 or 4 years old. The child does something out of curiosity or something else, and the parent punishes the child. Tells them that they're bad or what they did was unacceptable. So the child grows up into an adult who believes that there's something bad or unacceptable about them. So what they do is to try and compensate through their life experiences and relationships. They are constantly asking questions. Am I good enough for you? Have I done enough? Have I achieved enough? Do you like me? Some will try to address the issue by seeking out therapy. But the problem here is that therapy only seeks to repair the ego and restore self-esteem. The objective is to go from the negative back to zero by emphasizing the positive. Yet in many cases the core memory remains. Often you go from one game of rumination and overthinking to another. This is because the ego demands continuity. It demands security, both emotional and psychological security, and it seeks control. It becomes a chase, a pursuit, and so the ego seeks control and closure or a sense of finality. This is true across all levels of reality. If a government wants to create a culture of authoritarianism, it will implement austerity and create insecurity in society. Out of the social disorder and chaos, a culture of authoritarianism is born. People develop an authoritarian mindset and start demanding simplistic solutions to complex problems. It's the same mechanism. The desire for control arises out of disorder and insecurity. This gives you a cluster of different issues. The first issue is that you're trying to control things which cannot be controlled. You cannot really control how a conversation goes. You have no control over what someone else thinks or what goes through their mind. You're focusing on one image of you. The issue is that, if you're an adult human being, there's millions of different images of you out there in the environment or the world. Everyone who you've ever had a conversation with has an image of you recorded into memory. Not only that, but everyone who has ever passed you in the street has an image of you. But if you were to ask everyone, millions of people, what they think about you, and put all that information together, you would end up describing someone who you think will be totally different from you. Yet here you are concentrating on just one single image of you. The next issue here is that, in seeking control, you're seeking finality or closure from your conversation. Most social conversations you have cannot have any kind of finality or closure. Most social conversations are open-ended. That's why we say "see you later" to end a conversation. The reason why you're seeking finality or closure has a lot to do with the fact that through thought you are seeking continuity and permanence. But there is no permanence or continuity because thought is a manifestation of being. Thought is also insecure, because it is fragmented, but it is also a manifestation of being. So we can go back because being is a manifestation of existence, because you cannot be if you don't exist. Existence is a manifestation of reality, because if you exist then you must be real. Then there's the other issue in that, in centering yourself on your ego, you're presenting yourself as a concept, an image. You're trying to put yourself across as a perfect, flawless image, and you're neither flawless nor perfect. You're a flawed, fallible, imperfect human being. The same as everyone else. But see, when you're trying to present yourself as an image or concept, you're going to feel insecure and anxious. This leads to another issue in that, more than likely, you end up trying to explain yourself and even justify yourself. This is especially true when you're dealing with people you give your authority to, or hold in high esteem, such as a boss, an employer, or authority figure. The issue here is that people generally don't like to be taught or explained to. However, if you present yourself as you, and start talking in narratives or stories, you'll find that generally people are far more receptive of you and more respectful. People like stories. They like narratives. If you struggle with social interaction and conversations, this is something you might like to consider changing. So this is where we get to the center of the whole issue. For as long as you identify self or your being with either physical form or a concept of your physical form, you're going to be trapped by your social conditioning and caught up in repeating old patterns of thinking. When you think what you thought and do what you did, all you can end up with is the past. The reason being is that you're off-center, you're trapped between memory and imagination. All you can have when you're stuck between your memory and imagination, and between the past and the future, is thought and images or concepts. The only way past this is to center yourself and start using your whole internal architecture again. So to get out of the habit of rumination and overthinking, you're going to have to center yourself. In the occult and spirituality, there are different terms for centering yourself or bringing yourself to center, such as rooting, grounding, and so on. What all these terms really mean is alignment of your internal architecture to your environment and energies so that you can experience a sense of flow. Life is very much like water in that it is meant to flow, not stagnate. What this means is centering yourself in your awareness or conscious awareness on sense. Your felt sense of immediate experience can be taken to be your center. It's right there in the center of your internal architecture, on the edge or interface of perception and conception. What you need here is presence, or presence of mind. Most people aren't present but are absent. They are absent because they're caught up in that same loop within the ego between memory and imagination, and between past and future, so they miss out on what is arising in what we can call the immediate past. Presence of mind requires that you be fully conscious, within your conscious awareness. It means that you are centered on that interface between perception and conception. This is where meditation becomes very helpful. If you understand the 5 dimensions of living existence, you will understand that the physical body, or biological matter, is on its own level of reality. Your physical body has no past and no future. It is always in the present moment. Breath or breathing is always in the present. Breathing is everything. It is not only just the activity of the present moment, but is also a clear example of the mystical transaction. Are you the one who is breathing, or are you the one who is compelled to breathe by your environment or nature? The answer is both. You are breathing through subconscious action, as it's not normally something you think about. When asked about your hobbies, you never say that you enjoy breathing your body or beating your heart. So meditation is where you center your mind on your breathing and as a result become automatically centered. There is no need to assume the lotus position or any other position. This is performative. The whole point of meditation is to liberate yourself from all conscious activity, which includes everything performative. I went through the whole 9 yards of Buddhism, learned all the different types of meditation, sitting, lying, standing, walking, samatha meditation, and so on. The only thing that matters in meditation is to center the mind, because otherwise you get distracted, start off another thought process and defeat the objective. So once you're centered in your awareness and in alignment with everything else, you become real and are authentic. You have what is known as presence of mind. Once you are centered, you are real and authentic, and therefore have no need to perform. There is no need for editing because there is no need for imagination, because you have your sensory perception back. You cannot regret neither your realness nor your authenticity, because what you regret is your performance through your ego. Performance always creates anxiety and insecurity. Please don't take my word for it. Ask a trained actor, someone involved in sports, anyone who has gone through a job interview. The ego is a concept, an image, a role, it's your mask, your public-facing role, so when you are centered in your perspective on your ego, then you will always be unsure of yourself, anxious, insecure, fearful. However, if you are centered on your being, in your felt sense of immediate experience, you are connected with everything else, have presence of mind, and, for as long as you trust yourself, and trust others, you have no need to feel insecure. But when you center yourself on your ego, you go back to your conditioned mindset, back to the same fears, anxieties, and insecurities, and back to the same moral reasoning and thinking. So you're back to making judgment calls on any and all your conversations and social interaction. Validation stabilizes, criticism destabilizes, silences destabilize you, compliments stabilize you. You need self-esteem constantly, but you're not going to constantly get esteem from others because they're not in your head space. Your anxiety and insecurity is not anybody else's problem, but is the symptom that you're not centered in your awareness. Let us not overlook the mystical transaction here, that relationship between the environment and your brain and mind. Breathing is an example of the mystical transaction. Yes, you breathe in and out, but the environment is giving you the air to breathe in and out, and breathing is the default. You do not need any conscious effort to breathe in and out, well, not unless you have asthma or bronchitis, but generally it all happens effortlessly. This is because your brain, senses, and lungs are in alignment with your environment. Similarly, your brain and mind is capable of manifesting reality the same as the environment. Reality, existence, and being are all, in terms of imagery at least, one and the same and equal. You are who you are because you exist, and because you exist you are real. Yet in your conditioned mind you are centered on your ego, which is a concept. See, this is part of the root of your issue. If you play back your thoughts from your overthinking and anxiety, you will find that your thoughts are hostile, negative, violent, critical. You're constantly attacking yourself. You point out the things you feel you shouldn't have said. You were too open. You sounded stupid. You said more than you needed to. You're measuring your being up against your conceptual image of yourself. This is all coming out of the reality you have created out of your imagination. Your memory is full of attachments, emotional attachments, psychological attachments, and if you are centered on your ego or self-image, it's very easy to let your thought processes run through your mind and start creating all kinds of reality which only exists in your mind and your imagination. But these manifestations of reality only exist because you are off-center and your conscious perspective is centered on your ego. So when you make mistakes, misunderstand as you will invariably do, you will go back to your habit of beating yourself up over not living up to your imagined reality. Being centered in your conscious awareness is not enough. You also need to develop the natural mindset that goes with it. A natural mindset is completely different from a conditioned mindset. The basis of a natural mindset is non-attachment and trust. You trust yourself just as you trust others. You say to yourself, let's see what I can do. You say to others, show me what you can do. This is what opens you up, and you let everything go and leave it to exist in its own moment in time. If you approach others willing to trust and with an open mind, 99 times out of 100 they will respond. This of course requires acceptance. Acceptance of who you are. Acceptance of other people and who they are. Acceptance is what liberates. It's condemnation and judgment which imprison people in their invisible prisons. This is true not just on an individual level. It's also true on a social level. Condemnation of other is what keeps people trapped in their ego structures. This is what keeps society divided. You're going to make mistakes and misunderstand anyway because you're a human being. You're inconsistent, you make mistakes, you're a work in progress. But see, when you're centered on your conscious awareness, you recognize your mistakes, you accept them, you learn from them, and, being integral and authentic, you also admit to them. If you are real and authentic, nobody has an issue with you when you make mistakes or misunderstand, because other people do it too. It is your choice as to whether you learn from the experience or you use it as an excuse to beat yourself up over it. If you're going to go through life treating every interaction and conversation as a test or a challenge, then your life will quickly become exhausting and problematic. The universe is not a punishment and reward system. The universe is actually a system of opportunity which gives you as many opportunities you need to get your shit together. If you don't get it the first or second time, then maybe you will get it on the third or fourth opportunity. For all the time and energy you spend trying to perfect a conceptual image of yourself, which is what your ego is, you could be spending that time and energy developing personal integrity. Personal integrity is matching up what you think to what you say and what you do. It's the basis of living your individual truth, which of course manifests out of your conscious awareness. Many people talk about having an awakening experience, such as listening to a piece of music, a failed relationship, your first experience with drugs. But if you understanding that you can have an awakening experience, then your whole life can be an awakening experience. This is where I want to touch on dream weaving. Dream weaving is a magical way of developing conscious awareness and insight. Magic, like yoga, is all about connection and unity. Dream weaving is literally the weaving together of different memories, thoughts, emotions, feelings, recollections, and narratives so as to create a new sense of reality. This can be done through social interaction and conversation. It is through dream weaving that you can practice and develop a new sense of reality or even manifest new reality. The difference in mindset can be quite profound, because instead of imagining new levels of reality and constantly dividing and attacking yourself through getting attached, you're tuning into reality as it comes and making the connections. You are therefore witnessing the unfolding nature of reality, existence, and being. It doesn't require too much of a mental leap to understand that who you are now at this moment in time is different to who you were when you woke up this morning, and also to who you were yesterday or last week. This is who you are in reality. You are the physical manifestation of nature through reality and existence. You cannot be defined by any image or snapshot of your being. You cannot be defined by your ego. You are not a fixed model of anyone or anything. You're a very real, living human being. You're constantly growing, learning, evolving, and awakening. But in order to practice dream weaving, you really do have to be centered on your felt sense of immediate experience within your conscious awareness. Magic only works when there's a connection and unity. This means you have to let go of your mental and emotional attachments and your conditioned mind, or what is known as dropping your ego. The ego is all there, recorded in memory, and doesn't go anywhere. But you don't need to be centered on it all the time. It is possible to shift your individual conscious perspective between different levels of reality or planes of consciousness. You can be centered in your being and conscious awareness on the one hand, and slip into your ego and conditioned mind on the other. It's like when you agree to play a game of the board game Monopoly with friends. Oh, for sure, once you're the boot, the iron, or the Scotty dog, you can be as competitive and acquisitive as you like. But let's not forget, before you started to play, you and your friends were on a different level of reality, and you all agreed to play the game. The exact same principle works well in real life. By all means, you can go back to your ego, your conditioned mind, and play the social game, but never ever lose sight that you can always shift your conscious perspective and go back to being centered, within your conscious awareness and mindful. I'll leave you with that to think about.